intended purpose. All the best in your work, and it's a wrap for us in here in the precinct. I'll cross to my colleague, Nobu.
Very much, Bulela. And of course, the key thing being that 0.5 percentage point increase in VAT for 2025, and then a further 0.5 percentage point increase in 2026, which effectively means that come this time next year, VAT will be 1 percentage point higher at 16%. I do have with me two economists, Hannah de Nobrega, she's an economist at Prescient, and Levan Gopal, he's a director at Merchant Africa. Thank you, both of you, for joining us. I'll start with you, Hannah. We were talking about the VAT impact. Of course, National Treasury has tried to bring about more zero-rated products. Do you think, to some extent, this helps to counteract any regressive nature of VAT on poorer households?
So what would make the VAT regressive would be if they had applied it to all goods and services in South Africa. However, they've removed the VAT increase to only be they've removed any basic goods from the VAT increase. So that means that it's not regressive for the poor. It doesn't affect the poor as much as if it had to be based on all goods in South Africa.
Levan, I was quite surprised to see that they've basically said the social relief of distress grant comes to an end come the end of March 2026. I think some 10 million people do claim that money every month, 370 Rand. That's 35 billion Rand that the government has had to churn out over a number of years, but it comes to an end. And yet, President Ramaphosa has said that this may serve as a precursor towards a basic income grant. So there's a full stop there. What are the implications?
I'm personally very disappointed that that particular grant has come to an end. It's been a feature since COVID, and there are many that have become dependent on this. This has helped to feed families. We look at our economy with the unemployment rate as it sits, north of 30%, some 8 million people without jobs. They are probably the ones that survive on that 370 Rand. Let's counterbalance it with VAT, and there was a thinking that the increase in VAT might have been there to come through to afford to pay for that social relief. Well, now that we see we see 15% going up by 0.5% this year and 0.5% next year, it's likely to add about 15 billion to revenue, which certainly comes through to add value to our revenue, and every cent does count. I believe that more could have been done as well in terms of creating opportunities for youth employment. Programs could have been put in place to come to the rescue of those that are in need the most. Remember, as you remove that social grant, you're going to create hardship in this economy, and giving people 12 months notice is just not good enough. I must also share the R1 billion spend in infrastructure is welcomed, particularly the spend on water and electricity. These are areas, focus areas, that we need the spend in. In general, it hasn't been a storied budget. We saw personal income tax remain flat. We saw corporate tax remain flat. And you also noted the fact that there is going to be a widening budget deficit, and this has been something of a concern. If we've already come to terms with 22 cents out of every 1 Rand going towards payment of debt and other interest aspects of that massive amounts of borrowing, we're likely to see that amount increase going forward, and that for me is a concern.
Hannah, of course, I think, National Treasury has done its best to tinker around the edges, try and raise money where it can and so on. But the big elephant in the room remains growth. There's been a lack of growth. Were you satisfied that there are enough initiatives in play, you know, with the setting up of a PPP mechanism to ensure that the private sector is able to invest? Do you think enough's been done so that we can see growth taking shape going forward?
So in the past, we've seen that COVID was a big roadblock in terms of growth spending. We had to do a lot of spending for social distress grants and just upholding the well-being of the economy. So that was a very big survival technique that we had to do and spend on. Now we're starting to see, it's a few years after COVID, that spending is starting to ease on social distress, and we're really starting to see the fruits of the spending happening in infrastructure. So slowly we can see that Eskom and the electricity production has become a little bit more consistent throughout time, and we're yet to see the fruits of the labor are in the infrastructure, in Transnet, and how the competition in private sector is going to actually help us out there, right?
Yes.
So it's really it's a question of a wait and see, and we can already see the ball has started to get rolling. This is really the base of growth going forward. We can't grow our economy and have the bells and whistles before we have the primary ingredient, which is infrastructure, in place.
Levan, in terms of what happens hereafter, these are budget proposals that have been made. The DA has come out straight and said that they're going to oppose the VAT increase. To what extent are you concerned around the survivability of the GNU, given that one could say there's been a lack of compromise on the part of the DA, but of course their arguments are valid that we need to use the resources that we have properly, but in the interim?
I was very pleased when we had the notion of GNU after the elections. I thought this was an opportunity for South Africans to all have a voice, an opportunity for us to guide and grow the nation. Certainly, if you view it as a marriage, every marriage has its hiccups, and maybe this is one of those. I was also disappointed when we first saw the budget 3 weeks ago, and some parties decided to walk out and not to agree on the terms. There were certainly moments well ahead of the budget where they could have, and so some people might view that as grandstanding on the part of certain political parties, showboating to say that we have the power to stop the budget. I hope, after all is said and done, and this budget, which I believe to be a compromise compared to what was expected 3 weeks ago, I hope that the various parties come together and agree, and that this becomes a feature as our national budget, and we move on with our drama.
All right, well, we wait and see. Of course, those were my guests. Hannah de Nobrega, she's an economist at Prescient, and Levan Gopal, he's a director at Merchant Africa, speaking a little bit, just scratching the surface of the budget 2025 that was delivered by Enoch Godongwana, the finance minister. Of course, this is just the beginning now. A legislative process has to be gone through for Parliament to approve the budget, and we understand that should take place in the next couple of months. They've got very little time in which to get this matter sorted out. That is it from us here in the parliamentary precinct. And of course, we will continue to give you post-budget analysis and stories from the economics desk. My colleagues have been feverishly working in the lockup that we explained to you, that they sit in for many hours and then generate very comprehensive packages with graphics and speak to all the various issues that matter to South Africans, for businesses, households, etc., etc. That's a wrap from us. It's back to you in studio.
Fantastic. Nompumelelo Siziba, my colleague there, joined by earlier on Bulelani Philip and Abra Barbara, and of course a throng of journalists that have been giving you rolling coverage of the National Budget 2025 from Cape Town. Well, it has been a